This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
Someone who is kind of super interested in modeling devices, I first got wise to what the Fractal stuff was actually like in, I think, 2019 probably, when I got the FM3. This was my first time dipping my toe into the Fractal waters. If you're someone who's not tried Fractal stuff before, I think maybe the question that you might have would be around, is this thing worth the hype? I think for me, it's not really even hype, doesn't really apply to the Fractal stuff any longer, because they've been at it for so long and have done so much more work in this area than any of the other modeling companies that it's kind of clear. So if you're not aware, most other modeling devices, even the best ones, have like 80 amp models in there. Fractal have 300. If you're not aware of the depth of effects and stuff and the tweakability of effects, there isn't really anything that rivals Fractal for that stuff. I have questions about, is there still improvements that Fractal could make, or are they at a stage where they're really kind of coasting, or that sort of question. So for me, I think it seems like every company is going to be, for a while, trying to catch up with the amount of models that there is in the Fractal. And certainly if you're a person who's really into kind of making changes to circuits and all of that sort of stuff, there really is only one player in town for that. It's only really Fractal where you can get in to the level and change tubes, and you can change cathode bias, and you can change the cathode follower, all of this sort of stuff. It's also the case that the editing of kind of delays and reverbs and that stuff is about as tweakable, as many parameters as there is available on any unit, even down to sort of plugins like FabFilter. It's kind of that sort of level of tweakability where you've got, vast quantities of parameters that you could change if you wanted to. There are two main areas that I think that Fractal could make improvements that I think would enable more people to get more out of their gear. So one of them is that the actual user interfaces on Fractal have made a massive leap from the Fractal Axe 8 and from the previous generation. So they now have big color screens, and they're a lot friendlier to use. It's much easier to navigate the grid, I find, nowadays. And as someone who has tweaked on each of them, when I went back to the Axe 8, I found it really quite difficult to use. So it's clear that Fractal have paid attention and have made improvements to the user interface. I think there is still some improvements that could be made. Now, I'm not a user interface designer, but I think there are certain things like performance pages that you can only edit on the desktop editor, which of course the desktop editor is itself really good. I prefer to use the actual units themselves. And I think having things that are not available on the unit to edit that are only available on an editor, it's probably not ideal. I feel like that might be the main area. Potentially, if Fractal were to create another device, that's where the improvements would be, because it's been the case that they've got the highest oversampling across the board. They've got the most effects, they've got the most amps, they've got, they are at the top of the tree for most stuff. The only area for me, well, 2 or 3 areas where you could make some improvements. One is on that user interface, and simple things like assigning foot switches can be quite complicated and daunting for the first time you go into an override menu. There are, helpful channels that you can find to explain stuff, but as a user it can be daunting in some ways. Another area that I'd like to see from Fractal, and they have dipped their toe in this water, is in the VST plugin world. Now, they did this reverb plugin that I've not managed to actually try, but I hear people really like it. I think it would be a real good thing to be able to replicate some of what you can do in a Fractal unit within a VST world. We've seen Line 6 do this with Helix Native, and I don't think it necessarily detracts from the product. In fact, what it means for me is that I'm able to remain in the Helix ecosystem in more contexts. And similarly, if Fractal did the same sort of thing, I think they would make a huge dent in Neural DSP's plugin share, because Neural DSP is kind of new kid on the block in terms of, aggressively marketing VST plugins and stuff like that. And they did make quite aggressive moves towards Fractal and Fractal artist rosters and stuff. I think it might be an interesting thing to see Fractal trying to sort of take back some share of the VST world, if that was at all possible. Or maybe they're fine as they are, because Fractal don't have to even particularly worry about distribution. In most of the world, they have kind of G66, and you can buy from Fractal directly. They have this direct consumer thing going on, where I think to some extent they are able to control so much more of the production line that potentially they're a little bit immune to competition in some ways. And also I see this being the case for quite a lot of people, that a load of people are still touring kind of Kempers, and a load of people are still touring even Axe FX Mark IIs, which are, older Fractal units, but I think they still stand the test of time. And once you've dialed in these presets, I think you do get incredible tones out of them. I don't know for sure that we're going to see loads more amps added to Fractal, and I think we're also at the stage where there's maybe a little bit of diminishing returns, where if you've already got a list of 300 amps, perhaps that is a sort of point where if you start to add even more, it gets a little bit difficult to navigate. So maybe there are some other kind of UI things that you could do around that, so you could sort of split them up into types of amp or something like that. I think there are still plenty of UI things that you could do in the modeling space that have not really been tackled yet, maybe. But in terms of tones, the Fractal stuff, each time I turn it on, I really enjoy it. And in terms of, you know, if you wanted one box that could compete with Strymon, that could compete with Eventide, that can, well, not even compete, but probably outdo almost any other modeler out there, I feel like Fractal might be the one to go for. And the FM3 is not unreasonably priced. I think they're about £1,000, and used you can get them for about 850. I think if you're thinking, I want a modeler that can do it all, then Fractal for me is a little bit of a, you know, it's not a toy, it's really good quality stuff. And I think even if they stopped updating it today, it's good enough that you'd be happy for many, many years. And I don't think that's the case for some of the other more modern modelers necessarily. Fractal are not new to the game, they've been at it a long time, and in a lot of ways they know what they're doing. Not to say that there aren't loads of other great modelling choices, but that was just something that I was thinking about today when I played this. It's just an ongoing feeling like if you want the most out of your modeler, then Fractal to me seems to be the way to go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you disagree. If you want these sounds, they're in the Gumroad Fractal link. The presets that I use I'll leave in the comments. Cheers.